My coworker tried to blackmail me. She didn't know I was recording. The notification sound from my phone felt like a lifeline as Sarah leaned back in her chair, that smug smile spreading across her face like she'd already won. She had no idea I'd been recording every word of the last 15 minutes. So we're clear then? Sarah's voice dripped with false sweetness. You'll withdraw your application for the creative director position by Friday, and I'll keep this little incident between us. I stared at the manila folder she'd slid across the conference table, the one supposedly containing evidence of me stealing client concepts and selling them to competitors. Complete fabrication, but convincing enough that I felt my stomach drop when she first opened it 20 minutes ago. I need time to think about this, I managed, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Sarah checked her Cartier watch, the one she definitely couldn't afford on her associate marketing coordinator salary. You have until 5 p.m. Friday. That gives you 3 days to make a smart choice, Emma. 3 days. The creative director interviews were scheduled for next Tuesday. I'd been preparing for this promotion for 8 months, working 60-hour weeks, bringing in the Meridian Health account worth $340,000 annually. This position meant everything, not just the $15,000 salary bump, but finally getting out from under crushing student loans and maybe, just maybe, affording something better than my studio apartment with the broken air conditioning. What makes you think anyone would believe this? I gestured at the folder, though my heart was hammering. The fake emails looked disturbingly authentic. Sarah's laugh was sharp. Oh, Emma. Sweet, naive Emma. Who do you think they'll believe? You, with your little temper tantrums in meetings, or me? I've been here 2 years longer than you. Margaret trusts me. That was the part that stung most. Sarah had been systematically poisoning my relationship with our creative director, Margaret Chin, for months. Little comments about my attitude, subtle implications that I wasn't a team player, strategic absences during presentations that made me look unprepared. I'd started noticing the pattern 3 weeks ago when Jake from accounting mentioned that Sarah had been asking weird questions about my computer login times. That's when I started carrying my phone differently during our conversations, voice memo app ready to go. The Hartwell campaign disaster wasn't an accident, was it? I asked, fishing for more evidence. Sarah's eyes lit up. She was enjoying this too much to stay quiet. You really should be more careful with your flash drives. Amazing what can happen when files get corrupted at just the wrong moment. Bingo. The Hartwell presentation that crashed during the client meeting last month, making me look incompetent in front of a $200,000 account. I'd suspected sabotage but couldn't prove it. You deleted my backup files, I pressed. Prove it. Sarah stood, smoothing down her pencil skirt. But that's all in the past now. What matters is your future, or lack thereof. Unless you make the right choice. She paused at the door of conference room B, looking back at me with theatrical pity. You know, Emma, in some ways I'm doing you a favor. You're just not management material. Better to realize it now before you embarrass yourself further. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with my racing heart and my phone, still recording. I stopped the recording and immediately saved it to 3 different cloud accounts. Sarah thought she held all the cards, but she just handed me everything I needed to destroy her. My hands were still shaking as I sat in my car in the parking garage, replaying the recording for the 3rd time. Sarah's voice came through crystal clear, amazing what can happen when files get corrupted at just the wrong moment. I had her. Dead to rights. But as the adrenaline started to fade, reality crept in. Sarah wasn't just some random coworker, she was dating Marcus Webb from IT. The same Marcus who had administrative access to everyone's computers and could probably make my evidence disappear with a few keystrokes. The same Marcus who played tennis with our VP of operations every Thursday. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Jess. How did the promotion prep meeting go? I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. I couldn't tell anyone about this yet, not until I figured out my next move. Sarah had given me until Friday at 5 p.m., but I had a sinking feeling she wouldn't wait that long to start implementing whatever backup plan she had cooking. Another buzz. This time it was an email from Margaret Chin, Emma, can you come see me first thing tomorrow morning? We need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to my attention, Ice flooded my veins. It was only 3:47 p.m. on Tuesday. Sarah had said I had until Friday, but apparently she was already making her move. I forwarded the recording to my personal email, then copied it to a USB drive I kept in my glove compartment. Paranoid? Maybe. But I'd learned the hard way that Sarah played dirty. The elevator ride back to the 8th floor felt eternal. Our office buzzed with its usual late afternoon energy, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the coffee machine hissing in the break room. Normal sounds that now felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life through thick glass. Emma. David from the Meridian Health account team waved me over to his cubicle. Quick question about the Q4 campaign timeline. I forced a smile and walked over, hyper-aware of Sarah's empty desk across the floor. Her computer monitor was still on, displaying what looked like an email draft, though I couldn't read it from this distance. The client wants to push the launch date up by 2 weeks, David was saying. Think we can make it work? Absolutely, I replied automatically, my mind spinning. Send me the revised timeline and I'll adjust the creative brief. As David pulled up his calendar, I caught a glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision. Sarah had returned, but she wasn't alone. She was walking with Leonard Hartwell himself, the client whose presentation had mysteriously crashed last month. They were heading toward Margaret's office. My stomach plummeted. Leonard Hartwell, whose $200,000 account I'd supposedly botched, was here unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon, walking with Sarah like they were old friends. This wasn't coincidence. Emma? You okay? David was looking at me with concern. You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, I lied, watching through Margaret's glass office door as Sarah and Leonard settled into chairs across from her desk. Sarah was animated, gesturing as she spoke, while Leonard nodded gravely. Margaret's expression grew more serious with each passing moment. Whatever Sarah was telling them, it was working. My phone vibrated with another email notification. This one made my blood run cold. From HR-investigations at pinnaclemarketing.com. Subject, mandatory meeting, Thursday 9:00 a.m. Asterisk Emma, please report to HR conference room A at 9 a.m. Thursday morning. Bring your employee handbook. This is regarding a serious allegation that requires immediate investigation. Asterisk. Thursday. That was tomorrow. Sarah hadn't given me until Friday at all. She'd given me less than 18 hours. I barely slept that night, staring at my ceiling and running through every possible scenario. By 6 a.m., I gave up pretending and drove to the office early, hoping to catch Margaret before the formal HR inquisition began. The parking garage was nearly empty, just a few cars belonging to the early birds and workaholics. Margaret's silver Lexus was already there. She'd always been a 7 a.m. starter. But so was Sarah's red Honda Civic, which made my chest tighten. Sarah never arrived before 8:30 unless she had an agenda. The elevator felt like a tomb as it carried me to the 8th floor. Through the glass doors, I could see lights on in Margaret's office and movement inside. Two figures, heads bent over what looked like documents spread across her desk. Sarah was already there, probably delivering the killing blow to whatever remained of my reputation. I badged in and walked quietly toward my desk, trying to look casual while straining to hear any fragment of their conversation. The office acoustics were terrible for eavesdropping, but I caught bits and pieces. Pattern of behavior going back months. Client confidence is everything in this business. Really hate to see someone throw away their potential like this. Sarah's voice carried that same false concern she'd used yesterday, like she was reluctantly reporting a beloved colleague's tragic downfall rather than orchestrating it. My computer took forever to boot up, each second stretching as I watched their meeting continue. Margaret was taking notes, never a good sign. She only took notes during serious conversations, the kind that ended up in permanent files. At 7:43 a.m., Sarah finally emerged from Margaret's office, closing the door behind her with theatrical gentleness. She spotted me immediately, and her smile was pure venom wrapped in silk. Emma. You're here early. She walked over to my desk, positioning herself so Margaret couldn't see her face through the glass. Nervous about something? Just wanted to get a head start on the Morrison account, I replied, grateful my voice came out steady. Oh, sweetie. Sarah's whisper was barely audible. After tomorrow morning, I don't think you'll need to worry about any accounts. She leaned closer, pretending to look at something on my monitor. Between you and me, Leonard Hartwell was very upset when I told him about the other clients you've been shopping his strategies to. Turns out he's friends with someone at Brennan and Associates who mentioned seeing suspiciously similar campaigns. Small world, isn't it? My blood turned to ice. Brennan and Associates was our biggest competitor, and if Leonard thought I'd leaked his strategies to them. But it wasn't true. None of it was true. You're lying, I whispered back. Am I? Or did you just get sloppy? Sarah straightened up, her voice returning to normal volume. Anyway, I should let you prepare for your meeting tomorrow. I'm sure you'll want to get your story straight. She started to walk away, then turned back as if remembering something casual. Oh, and Emma? I'd be very careful about making any wild accusations. Marcus mentioned that your computer activity logs show some interesting patterns, late-night access, unusual file transfers. Really makes a person look guilty when they start pointing fingers at innocent colleagues. She was gone before I could respond, clicking away on her designer heels that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I sat frozen at my desk, the weight of her threat settling over me like concrete. Marcus Webb. Of course he was involved. With his IT access, he could manufacture whatever evidence they needed to support Sarah's lies. Computer logs could be altered, fake file transfers created, my entire digital footprint rewritten to fit their narrative. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, the recording from yesterday suddenly feeling insufficient against the mountain of fabricated evidence they were building. The office started filling up with my usual colleagues, their cheerful morning greetings sounding distant and hollow. In less than 26 hours, my career would be over, my reputation destroyed, and Sarah would slide seamlessly into the creative director role she'd been scheming toward all along. Unless I found a way to strike first. At 9:15 a.m., Margaret's office door opened and she gestured for me to come in. My legs felt unsteady as I crossed the floor, hyper-aware of every pair of eyes tracking my movement. Sarah wasn't at her desk, probably lurking somewhere to watch my walk of shame. Close the door, Emma, Margaret said, her tone unreadable. At 52, she'd built her reputation on being fair but ruthless, the kind of leader who could dissect a failed campaign with surgical precision while somehow making you grateful for the education. I sat in the same chair Sarah had occupied an hour earlier, noticing the stack of printed documents on Margaret's desk. My stomach lurched when I recognized screenshots of what looked like email exchanges, though I couldn't read the details from my angle. This is difficult, Margaret began, removing her glasses to clean them, a nervous habit I'd noticed during tense client meetings. Some serious allegations have been brought to my attention regarding your conduct on several accounts. Margaret, I know how this looks, but... She held up a hand. Before you say anything, I want you to know that I've always considered you one of our most promising team members. Your work on the Meridian Health acquisition was exceptional. That's why these claims are so troubling. Margaret slid a printout across the desk. It was an email thread, apparently between me and someone at Brennan and Associates, discussing campaign strategies for 3 of our major clients. The timestamp showed it was sent last Thursday at 11:47 p.m. I've never seen this email before in my life, I said, scanning the fabricated conversation. This isn't real, Margaret. Someone created this. The IT logs show it was sent from your computer using your login credentials, she replied quietly. Marcus Webb pulled the technical data this morning. The activity traces back to your workstation. There it was. Marcus had doctored the system logs just like Sarah threatened. I stared at the fake email, noting how perfectly it mimicked my writing style. Sarah had clearly studied my communication patterns before crafting this fiction. What exactly is Sarah claiming happened? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Margaret's expression grew pained. According to Sarah, she discovered these communications accidentally when you asked her to send an email from your computer last week. She said she noticed unusual files in your sent folder and felt obligated to investigate further. That's a lie. I never asked Sarah to use my computer. We don't even work on the same accounts most of the time. She provided screenshots of a text conversation where you asked her to send a file to the Morrison client because you were in back-to-back meetings. Margaret showed me another document, my phone number texting Sarah's, asking her to send the Morrison brief from my desktop. Password is MAP2019. I stared at the fabricated text thread, recognizing my old password from 6 months ago. Margaret, check my phone records. I never sent those texts. And that password expired in September. I changed it to comply with the quarterly security update. Something shifted in Margaret's expression. You changed your password in September? Yes, we all did. IT sent the mandatory update reminder. My current password has been different since September 15th. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to find the password change confirmation email. Here, IT confirmed my password update on September 15th at 2:31 p.m. Margaret leaned forward, studying my phone screen. But these text messages are dated October 12th, and they reference your old password. Exactly. Whoever created this fake conversation didn't know I'd changed my password. My heart was racing as the pieces clicked together. Margaret, someone is setting me up. These emails, these texts, none of it is real. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against her desk. Emma, if you're right, this would mean someone has gone to extraordinary lengths to frame you. That's a very serious accusation. I know how it sounds, but I have proof. I pulled out my phone, navigating to yesterday's recording. Sarah confronted me yesterday about withdrawing from the creative director position. She admitted to sabotaging the Hartwell presentation last month. I recorded the entire conversation. Margaret's eyes widened. You recorded a conversation with a colleague? She was blackmailing me. I had to protect myself. I hit play, and Sarah's voice filled the office. Asterisk, amazing what can happen when files get corrupted at just the wrong moment. Asterisk. As the recording played, Margaret's expression transformed from skepticism to shock to cold fury. When Sarah's voice bragged about the Hartwell sabotage, Margaret's knuckles went white as she gripped her pen. The recording ended with Sarah's parting threat about my future, or lack thereof. The silence that followed felt electric. Margaret reached for her phone. I'm calling an emergency meeting with HR and Leonard Hartwell. We're getting to the bottom of this right now. Wait, I said, my hand instinctively reaching toward Margaret's phone. Before you call that meeting, there's something else you need to know about Marcus Webb. Margaret paused, her finger hovering over the contact list. What about Marcus? He's dating Sarah. Has been for about 3 months now. And he's the one with administrative access to create those fake email logs. I took a breath, knowing how paranoid this was about to sound. Margaret, what if Leonard Hartwell's visit yesterday wasn't just about the alleged client information leak? What if Sarah orchestrated that too? Margaret set down her phone, her expression growing more troubled. Explain. Think about it, how did Leonard supposedly find out about these leaked strategies? Sarah claimed someone at Brennan and Associates mentioned seeing similar campaigns, but that's awfully convenient. And why would Leonard come here personally instead of just calling? Unless... I paused, the pieces falling into place. Unless Sarah contacted him first. You think Sarah called Leonard and fed him this story about leaked strategies? I think she's been planning this for weeks. The Hartwell presentation crash, the mysterious computer logs, even dating Marcus to get IT access, it's all connected. I pulled up my phone again. Margaret, can you check when exactly Leonard called to schedule yesterday's meeting? Margaret turned to her computer, clicking through her calendar system. After a moment, her face went pale. He didn't call to schedule a meeting. According to my assistant's notes, Sarah requested the meeting with Leonard. She told Jessica that you had asked her to set it up because you wanted to discuss the Q4 campaign adjustments. My stomach dropped. I never asked Sarah to schedule anything with Leonard. I haven't spoken to him since the presentation disaster last month. Margaret was already reaching for her desk phone. Jessica? Yes, it's Margaret. I need you to pull the exact details about yesterday's meeting with Leonard Hartwell. What do you mean Sarah canceled his follow-up? She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. When was that canceled and why wasn't I informed? I could hear Jessica's muffled voice through the receiver, sounding confused and apologetic. Margaret's expression grew darker with each word. Thank you, Jessica. And please don't mention this conversation to anyone. Margaret hung up and turned back to me. Leonard had scheduled a follow-up meeting for this afternoon to discuss next steps regarding the alleged security breach. Sarah canceled it 20 minutes ago, claiming the situation was being handled internally. She's trying to control the narrative, I realized. Keep Leonard from asking too many questions that might expose the holes in her story. Margaret stood abruptly, pacing to her window overlooking the city. Emma, if you're right about this, we're dealing with something far more serious than workplace competition. This is fraud, harassment, potentially criminal behavior. I know. And that's why I need to ask you something important. I took a deep breath. When you call HR, I need you to request that Marcus Webb not be involved in any technical investigation. If he's been helping Sarah manufacture evidence, he can't be trusted to examine the very systems he's been manipulating. Margaret nodded slowly. We'll need an external IT forensics team. Someone who can trace the real digital fingerprints without bias. She returned to her desk, her movements sharp and decisive. Emma, I want you to go home for the rest of today. Don't talk to Sarah, don't access your work computer, and don't discuss this with anyone else on the team. What about the HR meeting tomorrow morning? There won't be one. At least, not the one Sarah thinks there will be. Margaret's smile was grim. Tomorrow morning, Sarah is going to get a very different kind of surprise. I drove home in a daze, Margaret's final words echoing in my head. The familiar route to my apartment felt surreal, like I was moving through someone else's life. Every few minutes, I caught myself checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Sarah's red Honda following me. My studio apartment had never felt smaller. I sat on my second-hand couch, staring at my phone and fighting the urge to call Jess. Margaret had been clear, don't discuss this with anyone. But the silence was suffocating, and my mind kept racing through everything that could go wrong. What if the external IT team couldn't prove the emails were fabricated? What if Marcus had covered his tracks too well? What if Sarah had backup plans I hadn't even considered? At 3:17 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Emma Rodriguez? The voice was professional, unfamiliar. Yes? This is Detective Patricia Voss with the Financial Crimes Unit. I understand you may have information relevant to an ongoing investigation. My blood went cold. I'm sorry, what investigation? Ma'am, I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Would you be available to come to the station this afternoon, or would you prefer we send someone to you? The room started spinning. Detective, I think there's been some misunderstanding. What is this about? Corporate fraud and identity theft allegations filed this afternoon. Your name came up as both a potential victim and a person of interest. Detective Voss's tone remained neutral, but something in her phrasing made my stomach clench. Ms. Rodriguez, this is not an accusation. We're simply trying to gather information. Person of interest. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Can I ask who filed the report? That information will be discussed during our conversation. Are you available at 5 p.m. today? I agreed to meet her at the station, my hands shaking as I hung up. Sarah had escalated this beyond the office. Somehow, she'd gotten law enforcement involved, probably painting herself as the whistleblower who discovered my alleged corporate espionage. But as the initial panic subsided, a spark of hope flickered. If Sarah had involved the police, she might have overplayed her hand. Real detectives would conduct a real investigation, one that Marcus couldn't manipulate with fake computer logs. I spent the next hour making copies of everything, the recording, my password change confirmations, even screenshots of my actual text history with Sarah showing we'd barely communicated in recent months. If this was war, I needed ammunition. At 4:45 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, you should have taken the deal. Now everyone's going to know what kind of person you really are, asterisk. I screenshotted it immediately. Sarah was getting reckless, probably high on her own perceived victory. But she just handed me more evidence of harassment. The police station was a maze of fluorescent lights and institutional beige. Detective Voss turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with graying brown hair and an expression that revealed nothing. Ms. Rodriguez, thank you for coming in. She led me to a small interview room that smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. I want to start by saying that our investigation is in very early stages. We're speaking with several individuals to understand the scope of the alleged criminal activity. Can you tell me what exactly what the complainant is alleging? Detective Voss consulted her notes. The report claims that sensitive client data from Pinnacle Marketing has been systematically stolen and sold to competitors over a period of several months, resulting in significant financial damages to multiple businesses. The complainant provided what appears to be substantial digital evidence. Detective, I believe the complainant has fabricated that evidence. I have reason to believe this is part of an elaborate scheme to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. I pulled out my phone. I recorded a conversation yesterday where she admitted to sabotaging my work and attempting to blackmail me. Detective Voss raised an eyebrow. You recorded a colleague without their knowledge? She was threatening to destroy my career with false allegations. I was protecting myself. I played a portion of the recording where Sarah bragged about corrupting my presentation files. Detective Voss listened carefully, taking notes. When it finished, she looked up. This is interesting, Ms. Rodriguez. The complainant specifically mentioned that you might try to deflect blame onto her. She said you'd been acting erratically lately, possibly due to financial pressure. My heart sank. Sarah had anticipated this move, preemptively poisoning the well against anything I might say in my defense. Detective, what kind of evidence did she provide? Email communications, bank records showing unusual deposits, computer logs documenting unauthorized access. Detective Voss studied my face carefully. However, I'll admit some aspects of her story raised questions. That's why I wanted to speak with you directly. What kind of questions? Detective Voss leaned back in her chair. 30-year veteran of financial crimes, Ms. Rodriguez. When someone walks in with a perfectly organized case against a colleague, complete with printed emails, detailed timelines, and a recording of their own conversation where the suspect supposedly confesses, it makes me curious about their motives. Hope flared in my chest. She recorded our conversation too? Claimed she started recording when you became hostile and made what she characterized as threatening statements. Detective Voss pulled out a small recorder. Would you like to hear her version of yesterday's events? My mouth went dry as Detective Voss hit play. Sarah's voice filled the small interview room, but the conversation that emerged was nothing like what had actually happened. Emma, I'm really concerned about you, Sarah's recorded voice said, dripping with false compassion. I know you've been under financial pressure, but stealing client data isn't the answer. You don't understand, came a voice that sounded like mine, though I'd never said those words. I needed the money. My student loans are crushing me, and when Brennan and Associates offered me $15,000 for the Hartwell strategies, I couldn't say no. I stared at the recorder in horror. That's not real. That's not what happened. Detective Voss paused the playback. This conversation allegedly took place yesterday at 4:30 p.m. in Conference Room B. According to Ms. Chen, you became increasingly agitated as she tried to convince you to come forward voluntarily. Chen? Sarah's last name is Chen? The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Detective, what's Margaret Chen's relationship to the complainant? Detective Voss consulted her file. Margaret Chen is listed as Sarah Chen's emergency contact. They're sisters. The room tilted. Margaret wasn't just my boss, she was Sarah's sister. Every conversation we'd had this morning, every moment I thought I was gaining an ally, Margaret had probably been reporting back to Sarah. The password discrepancy I'd pointed out, my suspicions about Marcus Webb, even the external IT investigation Margaret had promised, Sarah knew about all of it. Ms. Rodriguez? You look pale. Do you need some water? The external forensics team Margaret mentioned, I managed. Has that been arranged? Detective Voss flipped through several pages. According to the complaint filed this afternoon, an emergency IT investigation was already conducted by Marcus Webb from your company's internal team. His findings corroborated the email evidence and timeline. Marcus had spent the day manufacturing more fake evidence while I thought Margaret was on my side. Meanwhile, Margaret and Sarah had probably been coordinating their next moves, using everything I'd revealed to strengthen their case against me. Detective, I need to tell you about Marcus Webb. He's romantically involved with Sarah Chen, and he has administrative access to alter system logs and create fabricated evidence. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Rodriguez. Do you have proof of this relationship? I pulled out my phone, frantically scrolling through social media. I know they've been dating. Other coworkers have mentioned it. But as I searched through Sarah's carefully curated Instagram and Facebook profiles, I found nothing. No photos with Marcus, no relationship status, no digital trail of their connection. Sarah had been smart enough to keep their relationship completely off social media. Detective Voss watched my increasingly desperate scrolling with obvious skepticism. Ms. Rodriguez, I understand you're under significant stress, but making unsubstantiated claims about your colleagues isn't helping your situation. The fake recording continued playing in the background. My alleged voice was now describing specific client meetings where I'd supposedly gathered intelligence for competitors. Each fabricated detail was plausible, woven together with real facts only someone with inside knowledge could know. How is that recording even possible? I asked. Voice synthesis technology? Ms. Rodriguez, with respect, that's a fairly sophisticated explanation for what appears to be a straightforward admission of guilt. Detective Voss stopped the recording. The metadata shows this was recorded on a standard smartphone yesterday at the time and location specified. But the metadata can be faked too. Digital timestamps, location data, all of it can be manipulated by someone with the right technical skills. I was talking faster now, hearing how desperate I sounded but unable to stop. Detective, please, just listen to my recording again. Compare the audio quality, the background noise, anything that might show the difference. Detective Voss obliged, playing my authentic recording alongside Sarah's fabrication. To my horror, they sounded nearly identical. Same conference room acoustics, same timestamp, same voices. If I hadn't lived through the real conversation, I might have believed Sarah's version myself. I'll admit the audio quality is remarkably similar, Detective Voss said carefully. But that supports the complainant's timeline rather than contradicting it. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Margaret Chin. I stared at the screen, realizing that Sarah's sister was probably calling to check on how the police interview was progressing. Detective, I said, a desperate plan forming. Would you be willing to listen in on this call? Detective Voss studied the incoming call from Margaret Chin, her expression calculating. You want me to listen while you take this call? Yes. I think Margaret has been feeding information to Sarah all day. If I'm right, this call might prove their coordination. My finger hovered over the answer button. Can you record it legally? Given that you're consenting and this relates to an active investigation, yes. Detective Voss pulled out a small digital recorder. Answer the call, but put it on speaker. I accepted the call and immediately hit speaker. Hello, Margaret. Emma, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all afternoon. Margaret's voice carried exactly the right note of concern. If I didn't know better, I'd believe she was genuinely worried. There's been a development. The external IT team found some troubling inconsistencies in the system logs. Detective Voss raised an eyebrow, clearly noting how this contradicted the report that Marcus Webb had already completed the investigation. What kind of inconsistencies? I asked, watching Detective Voss take notes. It appears someone with administrative access has been altering timestamps and creating false entries. The forensics team thinks Marcus Webb might have been compromised, possibly someone accessed his credentials to frame you. I almost laughed at the audacity. Margaret was spinning a story where Marcus was another victim, probably preparing to cut him loose now that his usefulness was ending. That's incredible news, I said, playing along. Does this mean the email evidence against me isn't valid? The external team needs to run more tests, but it's looking very promising for you. However, there's a complication. Sarah came to me this afternoon extremely upset. She's claiming you threatened her during your conversation yesterday. Detective Voss leaned forward, clearly interested in this real-time contradiction to the complaint filed earlier. Threatened her how? I asked. She played me a recording where you admitted to selling client information and then became hostile when she tried to reason with you. Emma, I have to ask, is there any truth to what she's saying? Margaret, you heard my recording this morning. You know Sarah was the one making threats. There was a pause. Recording? Emma, I'm not sure what you mean. We didn't discuss any recording in our meeting today. My blood turned to ice. Margaret was rewriting history in real time, probably knowing that Detective Voss was listening. She was erasing the morning conversation where I'd played Sarah's confession, preparing to claim I'd never provided any evidence of Sarah's wrongdoing. Margaret, this morning in your office at 9:15 a.m., I played you a recording of Sarah admitting to sabotaging the Hartwell presentation. You called it extraordinary and said we needed an emergency meeting with HR. Emma, I'm really concerned about you. Our meeting this morning was about the allegations Sarah brought forward. You seemed confused and disoriented, talking about conspiracy theories involving Marcus and Sarah. I'm starting to think you might need professional help. Detective Voss was writing furiously, documenting every word. Margaret was systematically discrediting my mental state, probably laying groundwork for an insanity defense if their frame job started falling apart. What about the password discrepancy I showed you? The fake text messages that used my old password from before September 15th? Emma, honey, you didn't show me any password information. You kept insisting the evidence was fabricated, but you couldn't provide any coherent explanation. Margaret's voice grew more concerned. I think the stress of this situation might be affecting your memory. Have you been sleeping? Eating regularly? I have the password change confirmation email right here on my phone, dated September 15th at 2:31 p.m., I insisted. Sweetheart, I'm looking at your IT records right now. Your password was last changed on March 8th of this year. There's no September update in your file. My hand started shaking. Marcus had been busy today, apparently erasing all evidence that I'd ever changed my password. Without that timestamp discrepancy, the fake text messages looked completely authentic. Margaret, can you put Jessica on the line? She can confirm the details about Leonard Hartwell's meeting yesterday. Emma, Jessica is out sick today. Has been all week with the flu. Margaret's lie came smoothly. But I can tell you that Leonard called me directly to schedule yesterday's meeting. He'd been contacted by someone at Brennan and Associates who mentioned seeing familiar campaign strategies. Detective Voss caught my eye and made a small gesture. Keep going. Who at Brennan and Associates contacted Leonard? I believe it was their creative director, Amanda Walsh. She and Leonard have worked together before. Margaret provided the detail without hesitation, probably because she'd spent hours crafting this backstory. Emma, I really think you should come in tomorrow morning so we can get you some support. This paranoia about Sarah and Marcus conspiring against you isn't healthy. The call ended with Margaret expressing deep concern for my mental state and promising to protect me from myself until I could get proper help. Detective Voss turned off her recorder, studying me with unreadable eyes. That was enlightening, Ms. Rodriguez. Though perhaps not in the way you intended. The silence in the interview room stretched until it felt suffocating. Detective Voss's expression had shifted from curious to concerned, and I could practically see her reassessing everything I'd told her through the lens of Margaret's masterful performance. Detective, I know how that sounded, but Margaret is Sarah's sister. They're coordinating this entire. Ms. Rodriguez, Detective Voss interrupted gently. Margaret Chen identified herself as your supervisor when she called our department this afternoon to express concern about your mental state. She never mentioned being related to the complainant. My heart hammered against my ribs. She called you? Before I even got here? About an hour ago. She was worried you might try to deflect blame onto Sarah and suggested we handle the interview with extra sensitivity given your apparent psychological distress. Detective Voss leaned forward, her tone shifting to something almost therapeutic. She mentioned you'd been exhibiting paranoid behavior at work, talking about elaborate conspiracy theories. The room felt like it was closing in. Margaret had called ahead to prime the police against everything I was about to say. Every word I'd spoken since walking in here had been filtered through the expectation that I was mentally unstable. Detective Voss, please check Margaret Chen's emergency contact information in your system. Or better yet, run a basic background check. They share the same last name for a reason. Ms. Rodriguez, I understand you're grasping for explanations, but Margaret Chen is a well-respected business professional with no criminal history. She's been cooperative and transparent throughout this process. Detective Voss glanced at her notes. Frankly, her concern for your well-being despite being the victim of your alleged crime speaks to her character. Victim? Margaret isn't listed as a victim in Sarah's complaint. The amended complaint filed at 3:30 p.m. today includes additional damages to Pinnacle Marketing and specifically mentions threats made against management. Detective Voss pulled out a fresh document. This updated filing includes a recording of you making threatening statements toward Margaret Chen during this morning's disciplinary meeting. Another recording. My chest tightened as I realized the scope of what I was facing. They weren't just framing me for corporate espionage, they were building a case for workplace threats and psychological instability. Detective, I need to call a lawyer. That's absolutely your right, and probably wise. Detective Voss closed her folder. However, I should inform you that we'll be executing a search warrant for your residence tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. The warrant covers electronic devices, financial records, and any documents related to your employment at Pinnacle Marketing. My mouth went dry. A search warrant? Based on what probable cause? The recorded admissions, corroborating digital evidence, and witness statements from multiple Pinnacle Marketing employees. Detective Voss stood, signaling the end of our conversation. Ms. Rodriguez, if you're truly innocent, the investigation will bear that out. But I'd strongly recommend cooperating fully and considering whether you might benefit from psychiatric evaluation. I drove home in a fog, Detective Voss's words echoing in my head. Multiple employee statements, how many people had Sarah turned against me? The search warrant meant they'd seize my laptop, my phone, everything I'd need to defend myself. My apartment building's parking lot had never felt so exposed. Every car could be surveillance, every shadow could hide someone watching. I was spiraling into the exact paranoia Margaret had described to the police. Inside my studio, I sat on my couch staring at my phone. I needed a lawyer, but good attorneys cost money I didn't have. Public defenders were overworked and wouldn't understand the sophisticated digital manipulation I was facing. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, stop fighting this. Take the plea deal when they offer it. Trust me, the alternative is much worse. Asterisk. I screenshotted it immediately, but the number was probably a burner phone that would be discarded before morning. Sarah was confident enough in her victory to start making direct contact again. Then another text arrived, this one from a number I recognized, Leonard Hartwell. Asterisk, Emma, Margaret told me about your situation. I'm willing to consider not pressing charges if you make full restitution and enter treatment. Call me tomorrow before 10 a.m. Asterisk. The noose was tightening. By tomorrow evening, I'd probably be in custody, my career destroyed, my reputation permanently shattered. Sarah Chen would slide into the creative director position, and everyone would remember her as the brave whistleblower who exposed the unstable colleague who betrayed their client's trust. But as I sat there contemplating the wreckage of my life, something nagged at me about Detective Voss's interview. Something about the timeline that didn't quite add up, even in Sarah's perfectly constructed narrative. I pulled out my laptop and started typing, documenting every inconsistency I could remember before tomorrow's search warrant made it disappear forever. I spent hours documenting every detail I could remember, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I raced against tomorrow's search warrant. The inconsistencies were small, but they were there, tiny cracks in Sarah's otherwise perfect facade. At 2:17 a.m., exhaustion finally won. I'd filled 12 pages with timeline discrepancies, witness contradictions, and technical impossibilities in their fabricated evidence. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud account using my neighbor's Wi-Fi network, then printed copies to hide throughout my apartment. My alarm went off at 6 a.m., though I barely slept. The search warrant was scheduled for 8 a.m., which gave me 2 hours to make the most important phone calls of my life. I started with Leonard Hartwell, hoping to catch him before his breakfast meeting routine. Leonard, this is Emma Rodriguez. I got your text about restitution. Emma. His voice was stiff, formal. I appreciate you calling. Margaret explained that you're going through some personal difficulties. Leonard, before we discuss any arrangements, I need to ask you something specific. When Amanda Walsh at Brennan and Associates contacted you about similar campaign strategies, what exactly did she show you? There was a long pause. I'm not sure what you mean. Amanda didn't contact me. My pulse quickened. But Margaret said Amanda Walsh reached out to you about seeing familiar strategies in their campaigns. No, that's not what happened. Sarah Chen called me directly last Monday. She said she'd discovered concerning irregularities in our account management and wanted to meet privately before involving authorities. Leonard's voice grew uncertain. She showed me email evidence of communications between your team and Brennan and Associates. Sarah had contacted Leonard directly, not the other way around. Margaret's story to Detective Voss was already falling apart. Leonard, did Sarah ask you to keep that initial contact confidential? Well, yes. She said the investigation needed to remain quiet to preserve evidence integrity. He paused. Emma, are you suggesting Sarah misled me about something? Before I could answer, my apartment buzzer rang. Through the window, I could see 2 police cars in the parking lot. They were early. Leonard, I have to go, but please remember our conversation. The real story is very different from what you've been told. I hung up as heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside my door. 3 sharp knocks followed by, police. Search warrant. I opened the door to find Detective Voss flanked by 2 uniformed officers and a young man carrying evidence bags and electronic scanning equipment. Ms. Rodriguez, we have a warrant to search these premises for evidence related to corporate fraud and data theft. Detective Voss handed me the official document. Please step aside while we conduct our search. Detective, I need to tell you something important about Leonard Hartwell's statement in the complaint. Ma'am, anything you say can be used against you in court. I'd recommend waiting for your attorney. I don't have an attorney yet, but Leonard just told me that Sarah contacted him first, not Amanda Walsh from Brennan and Associates. That contradicts Margaret's statement to you yesterday. Detective Voss paused in the doorway. What exactly did Mr. Hartwell tell you? Sarah called him last Monday with concerns about irregularities. There was never any contact from Brennan and Associates about similar campaigns. Sarah initiated everything. The detective glanced at her colleagues, then back to me. That's interesting. The complaint specifically states that external discovery of leaked strategies prompted the investigation. Because Sarah's been lying about the origin of this entire case. I pulled out my phone, showing her Leonard's text from last night. Look at the timestamp on his message. He texted me at 9:47 p.m. offering to consider not pressing charges. But according to your case file, when did Sarah first report this alleged crime? Detective Voss checked her notes. The initial complaint was filed at 11:30 a.m. yesterday morning. So Leonard was discussing plea deals and restitution less than 12 hours after Sarah first went to police? How does someone go from just learning about a crime to negotiating settlements that quickly? I could see the wheels turning in Detective Voss's mind. The timeline was impossibly compressed if Leonard had only learned about the alleged theft when Sarah reported it to authorities. Unless, I continued, Leonard had been discussing this situation with Sarah for much longer than anyone admitted. Which means the complaint filing was theater, the real coordination happened days or weeks earlier. Detective Voss turned to the evidence technician. Start with the electronics, but document everything carefully. I want timestamps on all data recovery. She looked back at me. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm beginning to think this case is more complicated than it initially appeared. Detective, there's something else. Margaret Chen called your department yesterday before my interview, but she never identified herself as Sarah's sister. That's not an oversight, it's deliberate concealment of material bias. You keep insisting they're related, but I haven't seen any evidence of. Check Margaret's emergency contact information at Pinnacle Marketing. Or run a basic family background check. They share the same last name because they share the same parents. Detective Voss pulled out her phone, stepping into the hallway to make a call. Through my open door, I could hear fragments of her conversation with what sounded like the HR department at Pinnacle Marketing. When she returned, her expression had changed completely. Ms. Rodriguez, I just confirmed that Margaret Chen listed Sarah Chen as her sister on her employment emergency contact form. Detective Voss's voice was tight. This information was not disclosed in any of our previous communications with Pinnacle Marketing Management. The evidence technician looked up from my laptop. Detective, you might want to see this. The browser history shows searches for corporate fraud legal defenses and whistleblower protection laws, but the timestamps are all wrong. Wrong how? These searches are dated 3 weeks ago, but the metadata shows they were actually created yesterday afternoon while the owner wasn't home. Someone with remote access planted fake browsing history to make it look like she was researching how to cover up financial crimes. The evidence technician's discovery hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Detective Voss leaned over his shoulder, studying my laptop screen with intense focus. Show me exactly what you found, she said. Look here, the browser history shows searches for corporate fraud sentencing guidelines and how to hide financial crimes dated October 2nd through October 8th. But the actual file creation timestamps in the system registry show these entries were all generated yesterday between 2:15 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. The technician scrolled through lines of code that looked like gibberish to me. Someone with administrative privileges remotely accessed this computer and backlogged fake search history. Detective Voss pulled out her phone. I need a warrant for Marcus Webb's IT access logs at Pinnacle Marketing. And I want Sarah Chen and Margaret Chen brought in for questioning immediately. Detective, I said, my voice shaking with relief and residual fear, there's more. I documented everything I could remember last night before the search warrant. Timeline inconsistencies, technical impossibilities in their evidence, witness statement contradictions. Where are these documents? I retrieved the printed pages from where I'd hidden them behind my bathroom mirror. I was afraid they'd disappear if I only kept digital copies. Detective Voss scanned the first page, her eyebrows rising. You documented 12 separate timeline discrepancies? When did you put this together? Between midnight and 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep knowing they were going to seize everything today. I pointed to item number 4 on the list. Look at this one. Sarah's complaint claims I sent the first leaked email to Brennan and Associates on September 23rd, but Pinnacle Marketing system logs show I was out sick that entire week with food poisoning. I have doctor's notes and prescription receipts. And you didn't mention this yesterday because? Because I didn't know what specific dates they were claiming until I saw the formal complaint. Sarah was careful never to give me exact details during our confrontation. The evidence technician called out from across the room. Detective, I'm finding more planted evidence on this laptop. Financial planning software that was allegedly used to calculate how much money she could make from selling client data, but it was installed remotely yesterday afternoon and never actually opened by the user. My phone rang. Leonard Hartwell again. Emma, I've been thinking about our conversation this morning. Something's bothering me about Sarah's initial contact last Monday. Detective Voss gestured for me to put it on speaker. What's bothering you, Leonard? I asked. She knew too many specific details about my business dealings with Brennan and Associates from 3 years ago. Details that weren't in any of your current campaign materials. When I asked how she knew about my history with Amanda Walsh, she said you'd mentioned it during strategy meetings. Leonard's voice grew troubled. But you and I never discussed my previous work with Brennan and Associates. How could you have told Sarah something you didn't know? Detective Voss and I exchanged glances. Sarah had overplayed her hand, including details in her fabricated story that she couldn't possibly have learned from me. Leonard, did you mention this discrepancy to Margaret Chen during yesterday's meeting? I tried to, but Margaret said you'd probably done extensive background research on all my business relationships. She made it sound like you'd been investigating me for months, gathering intelligence for your theft operation. Leonard paused. But that felt wrong too. You've always been straightforward in our dealings, never prying into my other business relationships. Leonard, I think you should speak directly with Detective Voss about the timeline of Sarah's contact with you. 20 minutes later, Detective Voss closed her notebook with a decisive snap. Leonard's statement had systematically dismantled the origin story that Sarah and Margaret had constructed. No contact from Brennan and Associates, no external discovery of leaked strategies, and most damning, Sarah's impossible knowledge of confidential business relationships. Ms. Rodriguez, I owe you an apology, Detective Voss said. This investigation took a wrong turn yesterday, but we're going to make it right. I'm putting out immediate arrest warrants for Sarah Chen, Margaret Chen, and Marcus Webb on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and evidence tampering. The evidence technician packed up his equipment, leaving my laptop and phone on the counter. The planted evidence is so obvious once you know what to look for. These three aren't nearly as clever as they think they are. As the police team prepared to leave, Detective Voss handed me her card. Ms. Rodriguez, you may want to contact Pinnacle Marketing's board of directors directly. With both Sarah and Margaret potentially facing criminal charges, there's going to be a significant management void in your department. After they left, I sat in my apartment surrounded by the chaos of the search, feeling like I'd just survived a tornado. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, you think you've won, but this isn't over. You have no idea how deep this goes, asterisk. I forwarded it immediately to Detective Voss. Sarah was still out there somewhere, probably destroying evidence and planning her next move. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The truth was finally coming to light. The victory celebration was short-lived. At 11:30 a.m., just 3 hours after Detective Voss left my apartment, my phone rang with a call that made my blood run cold. Emma Rodriguez? The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. Yes? This is Janet Morrison from Morrison, Kessler and Associates. We represent Pinnacle Marketing in all employment and litigation matters. My stomach dropped. Morrison was the client whose account I'd been working on, but this was clearly their law firm, not the marketing contact. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm calling to inform you that Pinnacle Marketing is filing an immediate restraining order against you for workplace harassment and threatening behavior. That's impossible. I haven't even been to the office since yesterday, and Detective Voss just confirmed that the criminal charges against me are being dropped. I'm afraid the criminal investigation and civil employment matters are separate issues, Janet Morrison continued smoothly. Our client has documentation of increasingly erratic behavior, including recorded threats against management and attempts to manipulate law enforcement with fabricated evidence. The room started spinning. What do you mean, fabricated evidence? The recording you allegedly provided to police yesterday has been analyzed by our forensic audio specialists. They've determined it was artificially generated using voice synthesis technology. Janet's tone remained professionally neutral while delivering the devastating news. Ms. Rodriguez, deepfake audio has become quite sophisticated. Creating a fake conversation is surprisingly simple with the right software. That's not possible. I was there. I lived through that conversation with Sarah. According to our analysis, the voice patterns attributed to Sarah Chen show clear signs of digital manipulation. The conversation you claim to have recorded never actually took place. Janet paused, letting the implications sink in. Frankly, Ms. Rodriguez, this level of technological deception suggests premeditation that goes far beyond simple workplace disputes. My hands were shaking as I gripped the phone. Who requested this audio analysis? Pinnacle Marketing's board of directors ordered the investigation after Detective Voss contacted them this morning about the arrests. They wanted to verify all evidence before making personnel decisions. Janet's voice carried a note of what might have been pity. I'm afraid the board now believes you've been orchestrating an elaborate frame job against your colleagues. But the planted evidence on my laptop, the fake browser history, the remotely installed software. Detective Voss's technician documented all of that. Yes, we're aware of those findings. However, our IT security consultant has determined that you could have easily planted that evidence yourself to support your false claims of being framed. Janet delivered each word like a nail in a coffin. Someone with basic computer skills could backdate files and create fake timestamps to make it appear they were victims of remote access. The sophisticated trap was becoming clear. Every piece of evidence I thought would save me had been anticipated and neutralized. The planted browser history wasn't meant to incriminate me, it was meant to be discovered and dismissed as obviously fake, making me look like an amateur trying to stage my own victimization. What about Leonard Hartwell's statement to Detective Voss? He confirmed that Sarah contacted him first, not Amanda Walsh. Mr. Hartwell has since clarified his statement. After reviewing his phone records and email communications, he realized he was confused about the timeline. Amanda Walsh did indeed contact him about suspicious campaign similarities. Janet's tone grew more formal. Ms. Rodriguez, I should inform you that Mr. Hartwell is now considering defamation charges for your attempts to involve him in your false narrative. This is insane. They're rewriting everything in real time. Ms. Rodriguez, I strongly recommend you retain counsel immediately. The restraining order hearing is scheduled for 2 p.m. today, and Pinnacle Marketing intends to pursue full prosecution for fraud, harassment, and evidence tampering. Janet paused. For your own sake, please don't attempt to contact anyone at Pinnacle Marketing or any of their clients. Any further contact will be considered violation of the pending restraining order. The call ended, leaving me alone with the devastating realization that I hadn't won anything. I'd walked directly into a more sophisticated trap, one that used my own defensive moves against me. The recording that I thought was my salvation had been discredited as a deepfake. The planted evidence that seemed to prove my innocence was now being used to demonstrate my guilt. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Voss, * new developments in the case. Need to speak with you immediately. Do not go anywhere or talk to anyone until we meet, *. But it was too late. The second phase of Sarah's plan was already in motion, and I was drowning in quicksand that got deeper every time I struggled. I was pacing my apartment like a caged animal when Detective Voss arrived at 12:47 p.m., her expression grim in a way that made my stomach clench. She wasn't alone. A tall man in an expensive suit followed her inside, carrying a briefcase that screamed federal authority. Ms. Rodriguez, this is Agent David Kim from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, Detective Voss said, closing the door behind them. We need to talk. Agent Kim set his briefcase on my kitchen counter with deliberate precision. Ms. Rodriguez, in the past 4 hours, this case has expanded far beyond simple workplace fraud. We're now looking at a multi-state operation involving identity theft, wire fraud, and money laundering. I don't understand. This morning you said Sarah's evidence was fabricated. It was, Detective Voss confirmed. But while we were investigating the planted evidence on your devices, our forensics team made some disturbing discoveries. Sarah Chan, Margaret Chan, and Marcus Webb aren't just running a scheme against you, you're one victim in a much larger pattern. Agent Kim opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick manila folder. We've identified at least 6 other cases across 3 states where the same trio has systematically destroyed careers and stolen identities. Always the same pattern. Sarah gets hired as a mid-level employee, Margaret secures a management position months later, Marcus infiltrates the IT department. My legs gave out and I collapsed onto my couch. 6 other cases? Patricia Walsh in Denver, does that name sound familiar? Agent Kim consulted his notes. She was framed for embezzling $47,000 from a nonprofit foundation. Lost her job, her professional license, spent 8 months in county jail before the charges were quietly dropped. Amanda Walsh, I whispered. Sarah told Leonard that Amanda Walsh from Brennan & Associates contacted him about leaked strategies. There is no Amanda Walsh at Brennan & Associates, Detective Voss said. But Patricia Walsh was Sarah's previous target. They're recycling names from their past victims, getting sloppy because they think they're untouchable. Agent Kim laid out photographs across my coffee table. Jennifer Chin in Phoenix, a marketing coordinator whose life was destroyed when she was framed for selling client data. Rebecca Chin in Austin, an account manager who allegedly embezzled funds for gambling debts. Notice the pattern in last names? My blood went cold as I studied the photos. 3 different women, all using variations of the Chin surname, all bearing a striking resemblance to Sarah despite different hair colors and styles. They're the same person, I breathed. Sarah's been using multiple identities. Sarah Chen, Jennifer Chen, Rebecca Chen, at least 4 confirmed aliases that we found so far. Agent Kim pulled out another document. Her real name appears to be Sandra Kowalski, and she's been running variations of this con for 7 years. Margaret and Marcus are her constant partners. Detective Voss leaned forward. Emma, the reason they're so good at this is practice. They've refined their system through multiple iterations, learning from each case what works and what doesn't. The audio analysis that discredited my recording, I said, the pieces clicking together. Morrison, Kessler and Associates said it was a deep fake. Morrison, Kessler and Associates doesn't exist, Agent Kim replied grimly. That phone call you received this morning? It was Sarah, using voice modulation software to impersonate a lawyer. She's been monitoring police communications somehow, staying one step ahead of our investigation. My phone rang. Unknown number. Agent Kim gestured for me to answer and put it on speaker. Emma, this is Janet Morrison again. I have an update on the restraining order hearing. Agent Kim immediately started tracing the call on his tablet while Sarah's disguised voice continued. The board has decided to pursue criminal charges after all. Detective Voss has apparently been compromised. We have evidence that she's been taking bribes to manipulate evidence in your favor. That's interesting, Agent Kim said, speaking directly into my phone. Because this is Agent Kim with the FBI, and we have a warrant for your arrest, Sandra Kowalski. The line went dead immediately. Agent Kim looked up from his tablet. Call came from a burner phone about 6 blocks from here. She's close, probably watching your building. Detective Voss was already on her radio, coordinating with backup units. All units, suspect is in the vicinity of Cedar Grove Apartments. Sandra Kowalski, approximately 5 feet 6 inches, brown hair, driving a red Honda Civic, license plate Delta Charlie 7492. Through my window, I could see police cars converging on the parking lot. After weeks of feeling hunted, I was finally watching the hunters close in on their real prey. The police cars had barely surrounded the parking lot when Agent Kim's tablet started pinging with urgent alerts. His expression darkened as he read the incoming data. We have a problem, he said, showing Detective Voss's screen. Sandra just accessed the FBI database using Detective Voss's credentials. She's downloading case files on all her previous victims. Detective Voss went pale. That's impossible. My login requires 2-factor authentication through my department-issued phone, which is right here. She held up her device, but Agent Kim was already shaking his head. Marcus Webb isn't just good with corporate IT systems. He's been cloning law enforcement credentials for months. Agent Kim pulled up a complex network diagram showing dozens of compromised accounts. Emma, when you thought you were recording Sarah's confession 3 days ago, you were actually part of a field test for their next evolution, framing federal investigators. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, field test? The recording equipment they detected, your suspicious behavior patterns, even your meeting with me today, it's all been orchestrated to make it look like Detective Voss is colluding with you to frame innocent employees. Agent Kim's fingers flew across his tablet. Sandra's not just stealing identities anymore. She's moving into destroying law enforcement careers. Through my window, I watched a red Honda Civic speed past the police barricade, somehow avoiding the converging patrol cars. Sarah had anticipated this trap just like all the others. Detective Voss's radio crackled, Unit 47 to Detective Voss. We've got reports of an explosion at Pinnacle Marketing Headquarters. Fire department is en route. An explosion? Detective Voss grabbed her radio. What kind of explosion? Appears to be the IT server room, ma'am. Massive data loss. The building's being evacuated. Agent Kim cursed under his breath. She's destroying evidence. 7 years of digital breadcrumbs, gone. He turned to me, his expression urgent. Emma, did Sarah ever mention any physical locations where they might store backup data? Storage units, safe houses, anything? No, but... I thought back to Sarah's designer accessories, her expensive watch, her perfect manicures. She was spending money like she had access to serious cash. More than just stolen client fees or embezzled funds. What kind of money? Detective Voss asked. Cartier watch, probably $3,000. Designer shoes every week, $500 bags, lease payments on a BMW she claimed was her cousin's. The details I dismissed as jealousy now seemed crucial. And she mentioned having a place in the mountains where she went skiing last month. Said it was a family cabin, but none of this is making sense if her real name is Sandra Kowalski. Agent Kim's eyes lit up. Mountain property would be perfect for a data storage operation. Remote, secure, no corporate IT oversight. He pulled up property records on his tablet. Colorado has no state income tax, making it attractive for financial crimes operations. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, you think you've won, but I own 3 FBI agents, 2 federal judges, and your precious Detective Voss. Check your email, asterisk. Agent Kim grabbed my phone immediately. She's bluffing about the judges, but if she's compromised multiple federal agents. He accessed a secure communication system. I'm calling for a complete investigation lockdown. No one outside this room gets any information about our next moves. What's in the email she mentioned? I asked, afraid to look. Detective Voss checked my phone and went white. It's a video file. Emma, you might want to sit down for this. The video showed Detective Voss entering a bank 3 weeks ago and walking out with a briefcase. The timestamp indicated 2:15 p.m. on October 5th, the same day I'd first started suspecting Sarah's sabotage. That's not real, Detective Voss said immediately. I was in court all day on October 5th. I have testimony transcripts, judges' records. But Agent Kim was studying the video with professional concern. The production quality is exceptional. This isn't amateur deepfake technology, this is Hollywood-level digital manipulation. He looked up at both of us. Sandra's organization is much more sophisticated than we realized. The video kept playing, showing Detective Voss allegedly meeting with a shadowy figure in the bank parking lot, exchanging the briefcase for what looked like a thick envelope of cash. Agent Kim paused it and enhanced the image quality. Wait, Detective Voss said, squinting at the screen. Look at my jacket in the video. What about it? It's my winter coat, the navy blue wool one. But October 5th was 78 degrees. I specifically remember because Judge Morrison complained about the broken air conditioning during testimony. Detective Voss pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos. Here, picture from that day in court. I was wearing a light blouse and no jacket. Agent Kim smiled grimly. Sandra made her first real mistake. She used winter footage to create a false timestamp. His fingers flew across the tablet. I'm running facial recognition on the bank's actual October 5th security footage, and there it is. Detective Voss never entered that bank on October 5th. This video was compiled from winter footage taken months ago. My phone rang again. This time I recognized the number. It was my own office line at Pinnacle Marketing. Emma Rodriguez speaking, I answered, putting it on speaker. Emma, thank God. It was Jessica, Margaret's assistant, and she sounded panicked. I've been trying to reach someone for hours. Margaret and Sarah never showed up today, and there are FBI agents everywhere asking about server access logs. Agent Kim gestured for me to keep her talking. Jessica, where are you calling from? I'm at the Denver office. They transferred me here this morning to help with the emergency IT restoration after the explosion. But Emma, I found something weird in Margaret's desk when I was packing her files. What did you find? A whole folder of employee records from other companies, people I've never heard of. Patricia Walsh from Morrison Foundation, Jennifer Chen from Phoenix Marketing Solutions, Rebecca Chen from Austin Creative Group. Jessica's voice dropped to a whisper. Emma, these look like identity theft documents. Social security numbers, credit reports, employment histories. Agent Kim was already coordinating with the Denver field office through his tablet. I could see him typing urgent messages while tracking Jessica's location. Jessica, this is Agent Kim with the FBI. Are you somewhere safe right now? I think so. I'm in the temporary office space at 1247 Cherry Creek Drive. But Agent Kim, there's something else. I found a key taped under Margaret's desk drawer, and it's labeled Vale Unit 247. Vale, I breathed. Sarah's mountain cabin. Agent Kim was already pulling up storage facility records for Vale, Colorado. Got it, secure space storage, Highway 6. Unit 247 is registered to Sandra Chen. He looked up at Detective Voss. How fast can we get to Colorado? Federal helicopter from downtown helipad, 40 minutes flight time. Detective Voss was already calling for transport. Jessica, stay exactly where you are. Denver agents will be there in 10 minutes to collect those documents and ensure your safety. My phone buzzed with one final text from Sandra. Asterisk, you may have found my storage unit, but you'll never find me. I've got 7 years of practice disappearing, and enough stolen money to stay gone forever, asterisk. But she'd underestimated her own arrogance. Agent Kim looked up from his tablet with satisfaction. Her burner phone just connected to a cell tower in Vale. She couldn't resist checking if we'd taken the bait about the storage unit. She's there, I realized. She's actually there, probably destroying evidence right now. Or thinking she's about to disappear with 7 years' worth of stolen funds, Agent Kim said. Sandra Kowalski, you just made your last mistake. As we rushed toward the helicopter, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, the certainty that this nightmare was finally ending, and Sarah would face justice for every life she'd destroyed.